presentations today. And we encourage you to ask your questions through the Zoom Q&A feature, which you can see below at your screen. You can type your question at any time, and then we will, at the end of the webinar, come to your questions and ask them to the presenters today. So as I mentioned, this webinar is part of a series of webinars, and I briefly would like to give you an overview on the other webinars to come. So there will be another webinar in May, which is about one of the case studies of GeneBEcon about virus-resistant starch potato for an environmentally friendly agro-industry. And following this webinar, there will be the second case study highlighted, which is about the microalgae case studies for high value and zero waste production system. And the last but not least webinar will then focus on a comprehensive and versatile gene editing toolbox, which was developed throughout the project. Before I go into the agenda of this webinar, I would like to get to know you a little bit, so to say. As this is a clear webinar style, we also wanted, nevertheless, engage a little bit with you. And so our colleagues from SPI will now start Slido. So it should appear on the right-hand side of your screen. And we would like to ask you the question, what prompted you to attend this webinar, to get to know you a little bit better, so to say. So let's see. So at least for me, it's popping up. And you will have a window on the right side of the screen with a Slido where you can type in your answer. So you can enter a word and then send it. And there will be also a word cloud then appearing. And there are also already answers coming in. This is nice. So feature working very well. So there you can read curiosity, information, interest in research results, which is very nice because that's also the aim of the project, to give research-based answers about NGT questions, communication. So where you're coming from, that's also nice. True, it's a very timely topic. So high also on the European agenda at the moment. So there's quite a lot of movement there on the regulation of NGTs. Okay, very nice. So I hope that we can advocacy, can also read interest in NGTs. Very nice. So I think with this whole webinar series, we can really dig a little bit deeper into the topic of NGTs. And yeah, without any further ado, I would then like to guide you through the agenda of today's webinar. So I welcomed you already, that you know. Dennis Eriksson, the project coordinator, is with us today, and he will give you a short introduction about the GeneBEcon project. Then we will have presentation by our project partners, Jan, and with his colleagues Emma and Miroslava, who worked on the consumer and stakeholder acceptance study of new genomic techniques. Then we have Gabi Buchwalder with us, who will give a retailer's perspective on the topics of NGTs and NGT-derived products. And Emma, who will give you a literature review and a summary of international trends and consumer research related to NGTs. And after that, we will have hopefully enough time for all your questions. And with that, I would like to give the floor to you, Dennis, to present the GeneBEcon project.
Okay, thank you very much, Amelie, for this nice introduction. Yes, my name is Dennis Eriksson. I'm from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and I am the coordinator of GeneBEcon. I wanted to start by pointing out that when the European Commission, when they decided to fund this project, they pointed out in the call text several things. Among the key things is that the project should advance the potential of new genomic techniques, and including gene editing, for example, and then support a societal dialogue with stakeholders and to ensure public knowledge and awareness. This webinar series we are giving now, for a set of 4 webinars, is one part of our many efforts in this direction. And I lost the function now to forward the slides. Is it possible to enable that one for me so I can forward the slides? Otherwise, I think you need to skip. Yeah, there it is.
And I think it's also not in presentation mode anymore. Is it?
That was a little bit
Yes.
too much.
Yes, perfect.
I think we are there now, exactly. Oops, yes. It's a little bit slow to react. Now, so in GeneBEcon, a very quick snapshot is that we are developing a gene editing toolbox, and we are applying it in potato and in microalgae. So through gene editing, as one of the new genomic techniques, we are developing a virus-resistant potato with an optimized tuber starch quality. And this is for a pesticide-free production in the field and a chemical-free industrial processing of the potato starch. In microalgae, we are producing high-value compounds while at the same time using the residual biomass of the microalgae as chicken feed. And this is to implement a zero-waste bioeconomy. We're also putting this technology into a societal context by, for example, analyzing different regulatory options. By looking into the data requirements for risk assessment, we are studying the economic impact and the incentives to invest in this technology. And then finally, what is the topic for today's webinar? We are investigating the public and stakeholder perception. New genomic techniques, such as gene editing, for example, they are, and let me point it out, they are not a silver bullet to all our challenges, and they are not a universal solution by any standards. That's not the point. But the point is that they can, for sure, contribute as one of many tools, and they can have, and they already have, a positive impact on many important things. For example, on many different policies related to the European Green Deal. So, for example, farmers, they want crops with good quality traits that perform well in the field. They give a good yield, but preferably, and importantly, with as little chemical or energy input as possible. In the big field of bioreactor production with microorganisms, that is a booming sector that has an enormous potential. So here, new genomic techniques, they can facilitate the development of high-performing and low-input production. So we can use NGTs, new genomic techniques, to develop organisms with traits that are beneficial for the environment, for the farmers, for the bioeconomy, and then finally for the consumers. But to have an uptake of these NGT products, many things need to be in place, so to say. So we need the breeders to be able to use the tools without being hindered by excessive regulation, but instead what enables safe and beneficial applications to reach the market. We need the farmers to have let's say, a positive perception so that they will actually, in the end, adopt and grow the improved cultivars. And we need consumers to accept them on the market. Without consumers, there is no point to develop any product. So that's very, very important. So these latter points we will hear more about now from my colleagues in GeneBEcon. So with this very brief introduction to GeneBEcon, I thank you very much for this attention. And if you want to know more about GeneBEcon as a whole, you can follow our next webinars, but also feel free to visit our website or send me a mail. So with that, I'll say thank you and give the floor back to you, Emily.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for this comprehensive overview on the GeneBEcon project. And with that, I directly hand over to Jan for his presentation on the consumer study.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, colleagues. Let me briefly summarize the results of our research within the GeneBEcon project on consumer and business stakeholder acceptance of NGT-derived bio-based products. As it was mentioned by Dennis, NGTs have enormous potential to contribute to food security by increasing yields, reducing risk of production, or improving the quality of produce. NGT also have potential to reduce negative impacts of agriculture on the climate and the environment. However, if this potential is to be realized, the NGT new genomic products, techniques, and in general new biotechnology has to be accepted by consumers and has to be accepted by business stakeholders. That's what we were trying to find out in our research. We conducted, first of all, we conducted consumer survey, representative consumer surveys in 5 countries. We have selected the biggest EU countries, Germany and France. Yeah, they are very important from market point of view, but also from the policy perspective, because they have enormous impact on acceptance of NGTs in Council or in the European Parliament. Then we also selected small and very advanced country from the Western Europe, Denmark, and to compare it, we have selected Slovakia, representing small country representing Central and Eastern Europe. Furthermore, we would like to compare the EU with the United Kingdom, the countries outside the EU, and it can provide us with different perspectives, at least because the United Kingdom is a little bit more advanced with respect to legislation process. In each country, we conducted representative surveys, representative in terms of gender, age, education, residence, and it was conducted by professional survey company, and the data was conducted online the first month of year 2024. Surveys are very quantitative, and we wanted also to complement our results by qualitative assessment, and therefore we have conducted stakeholder focus group discussions, and this discussion took place in June 2024, and the participants, we were trying to have a representative participants representing cooperatives, breeders, food and drink processors, retailers, and also representatives from our project and then other research projects. With respect to consumer survey, we have collected an enormous amount of data, but I will try to present the other results are coming in our deliverables and in our publications. but I just want to give you an overview of some important aspects that can be used in discussions on the NGT. So first of all, purchasing behavior. We found out that there are these traditional factors influencing purchase of consumers, and these traditional factors are quality of the food and the price of the food. But also, we have found out that other aspects have strong impact on consumers, and some consumers, their enormously strong impact have nutritional values, but also ethical issues related to food production and also environmental aspects. So in addition to traditional prices and incomes and quality factors, that there is a rising amount of consumers that also care about nutrition, obviously, and ethical and environmental factors. Because our research was mostly about information, we wanted to find out where consumers get their information and relate it to our results on NGTs. According to consumers, they still learn a lot from the package. Obviously, the labels are important mostly for the new products, not for the traditional ones that they are accustomed to, but they are affected significantly by their environment, friends and relatives. They read or they can get hold of the consumer reviews, and according to consumers, advertisement, they think that has no such a huge impact on gathering information on food. Then the second part of the survey of the questionnaire was awareness of new genomic techniques. Honestly, before some time ago, many of my colleagues knew nothing about new genomic techniques. So it was interesting to find out, because it's a very hot topic, what is the opinion of consumers. And mostly very few consumers knew the term new genomic techniques. It was knowledgeable according to their opinions, were only 9% of consumers, which is very little, very small number, and it is significantly less than awareness of the GMO. People know GMO more and are knowledgeable about this, but new genomic techniques, not much knowledge is available to consumers. And this import that we are working in the environment of very imperfect information. There are differences, obviously, between the countries with respect to awareness. There are differences between groups. Yes, younger people tend to have more knowledge, and as expected, education is important. More educated people know more about new genomic techniques than less educated. But generally, what was found out is that there is general lack of information about the new genomic techniques across age groups, across education levels, and across genders. That's why we, for the sake of learning opinions of consumers, we provided them with information, objective information based on the scientific approach and based on the information that was used by the European Commission, and then check them whether they understand what is still new genomic techniques according to their opinion. The one conclusion was that people, if there is imperfect information, better understand video, for example, than simple written text, which was quite interesting. And this is the current development in information provision. What was the acceptance of new genomic techniques? First of all, we compared whether consumers find the difference between traditional, conventional breeding and new genomic techniques. Yeah, and obviously, traditional breeding has much better connotation than still new genomic techniques. So significantly more positive opinion was on traditional breeding in all countries, conventional breeding, than on new genomic techniques. The least positive, that obviously very big, there are differences between countries, there are differences between educational levels, and there are differences between genders, for example. With respect to the countries, the least positive information on conventional breeding, on new genomic techniques was in Slovakia. The biggest, the best with respect to positiveness of the opinion on new genomic techniques was the United Kingdom. There is with respect to education, as I mentioned before, that there are differences between education levels with respect to awareness, and also there are also differences with respect to opinion. These differences are still not huge. There are small differences, and we found out that there is a kind of non-linear relationship between education and opinion on NGT. The best have most educated people with university education, then followed by the primary education. Secondary education was kind of not in the between, the most negative, but the differences still were not significant. We asked consumers whether they would buy products derived by new genomic techniques if they were available at the EU market. They would buy, obviously, they would buy. The most positive response was to furniture, yeah, then food, and they are the most considering purchasing cosmetics. So there are differences between products. There are differences between countries. There are differences between also educational levels and genders, residents as well. But these differences tend to be small because it's all driven by very small information consumers have about new genomic techniques. What would make consumers buy or purchase new genome products derived by new genomic techniques? They would buy it if it was healthier. Health consideration is quite important. If NGT was used to produce healthier products, food products, that would be good for the consumers, and it would make them to buy it the most. Then it is followed by the price consideration, as it was discussed even before, that quality and price are important. But what is coming up also is the environmental impacts. Environment as a public good is becoming more and more important in decision making of consumers. Yeah. Then there is a tastier argument, curiosity, and benefits to the local economy. Willingness to pay, that's quite important for consumers and especially for food supply chains. If there is new product on the market, how much consumers are willing to pay. At the moment, new genomic techniques are not sold at the EU market, so we couldn't conduct econometric analysis. We couldn't estimate demand for these products, but we used a different approach. Basically, we asked consumers to simulate the situation that they are in the supermarket, and they have to decide whether they buy product A or product B, and product A has different attributes than product B, and the product was selected jointly by the GeneBEcon research project to be yogurt, and important attributes were selected: price, nutritional score. A would be the best for the health, B second best, C the worst for the health. Then there was attribute environmental impact. It was either a standard project or eco project that has the best impact on the environment. And then the next attribute was production method, whether a product was produced by NGT or non-NGT method, conventional or NGT crop. So we provided consumers with choices that they can choose, either yogurt A, which is, this is the price. Yogurt B has a different price. Yogurt B is cheaper, for example. Yogurt A has a nutritional score C. Yogurt B has nutritional score A. Environmental impact of yogurt A is standard, and yogurt B is eco. It's better impact on the environment. One is NGT and one is non-NGT, and they would be asked many times with different attributes, different levels of this. We changed prices, nutritional score, environmental impact, and asks consumers to make selections. They could select either A or B or neither. And from this, we estimated the impact of attributes on the willingness to pay by the consumers. And these are the results. Let's look at the last row in the table. This is for Deutschland, Germany. It's minus 0.12. So it means that if the yogurt is produced by NGT method rather than conventional method, and all other attributes are the same, they are willing to pay for NGT product 12% less than for conventional product. So in order to buy the product, which is NGT. Consumers, given the information they have, require a discount. In Denmark, the discount is 6%. In France, they would require discount 14%. Slovak Republic 18%, and UK 7%. Yeah. With respect to, we also estimated if the product was ecological product, which has a positive impact on the environment. Yeah, they would be willing to pay a premium. In Germany, 13% more than for the standard products, given all other attributes are the same. In Denmark, 6% more, France 12%, Slovakia 3%, and UK 14%. Then with respect to nutrition values, B is second after the best nutrition value, C is the worst. For products with nutrition value B, they would buy it, but they require lower price, 28% in Germany and 24% in Slovakia. So according to our results, consumers are willing to purchase NGT-derived food with a discount. Then we had qualitative discussion with focus group participants, representative participants, which took also in 2024. This was to complement our results from the survey. And let me briefly summarize the discussion. Social acceptance of NGTs according to business stakeholders from the food value chains is higher than social acceptance of GMOs when GMOs started in the 1990s. So the situation has changed, and there is more acceptance of NGTs than was of GMOs. This is more or less in accordance with the literature and also with our results from the surveys. The younger generation is more prone to accept NGTs than the older generation. So there is some optimism based on these results on the side of business stakeholders, but acceptance of NGTs is not to be taken for granted. The situation can turn out against NGTs. It all depends on the information that are provided to the consumers and to the public, and on the activity in this on this information market. But at the moment, there is some positive opinion, but with some kind of that we should be aware of, that it's not 100% certain. Yeah. Business stakeholders, the whole food supply chain, as well as experts and policymakers are aware that there are many advantages of introducing NGT-derived foods in the food supply chain. So there would be significant costs if this is given up. This opportunity is not used. Most advantages accrue to producers and the environment rather than to consumers, but in the long run, increased competitiveness and when the regulation is streamlined and made more efficient, also consumers benefit from increased production, lower prices, improved quality of the products. There is a huge kind of problem with prohibitive legislation. And this legislation, there is an interplay between legislation and consumer awareness and public acceptance, social acceptance by the public of the NGTs. There is kind of an interplay between these two aspects. But generally, if there is prohibitive legislation, which was in the case of GMOs, there will be no development, no investment on NGTs or limited, and the benefits will be lower. So legislation is the key. For example, there is excessive labeling and strict traceability rules, which make NGTs more would reduce costs for production of NGTs and reduce demand for NGTs, can create obstacles to the growth of this segment of NGT-derived foods. Then there was a huge discussion about providing information about NGTs. This is the key, and providing objective information about NGTs to consumer is essential for their success. So, and there is a need for a transparent professional communication strategy adopted across the whole supply chains that would involve both farmers, other key stakeholders, producers, processors, but also public authorities, and that the message would be scientifically based, but provided in a way that is understood by the consumers. I also mentioned that there is different level of trust in different authorities between the countries. For example, in Slovakia, the trust in public authorities is lower than, for example, in Denmark from our results. So this has to be also taken into consideration. Communication is the key. And this is the end of my communication for this time, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jan, for guiding us through these interesting results of the consumer survey. I think it's especially the topic of awareness. I think that's a really relevant one also to know what we are talking about, and to see these differences between European countries, and also the choice experiment was very interesting. Thank you for that. And so in the last slides, you also mentioned the stakeholders and the value chain, which plays a very important role in this. And I'm very happy to welcome Gabi Buchwalder today, who will give now the next presentation and give us a little bit of insight in the retailer's perspective on NGT products. So Gabi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Oh, is this the correct? Oh, yes. Well, I I work at Migros. Migros, it's Switzerland's largest retailer, and I'm responsible for public affairs at the company. One of the issues I deal with is GMO and NGTs, and Migros also owns 20 food processing plants where we mainly process raw materials from Switzerland. We are firmly committed to sustainability. And that is why Migros is one of the founding members of the Sorten für Morgen Association, which means varieties for tomorrow. This association is founded in 2021, and it has 20 members, including growers, agricultural organizations, and processing companies. We are collaborating to promote a more open regulation on NGTs. Oh, sorry. And these are our goals. Anyone wishing to use NGTs in Switzerland should be able to do so, from growers to farmers. Regulation of NGTs should be practical and not create unnecessary hurdles. The emphasis should be placed on the opportunities that NGTs present rather than the risks. 2 points are relevant to us for the definition of NGTs. The first one is no foreign genetic material. And the second, the NGT plants must theoretically be able to be produced through conventional cultivation. We believe in the freedom of choice. This can be ensured through labeling at seed level. In our view, NGTs help to ensure more sustainable and sufficient production. Varieties containing better ingredients can be cultivated. We are very pleased with GeneBEcon's results. The illustrative example of the GeneBEcon project enable consumers to gain a better understanding of what NGTs can achieve and how they can be applied. This helps to build trust, and if consumers understand that these potatoes require significantly fewer pesticides, they will ideally want to buy them. In Switzerland, trials on NGTs are also underway, for example, on tomatoes, grapes, potatoes, and wheat, as you can see here on the slide. They focused on resistance to diseases, and the results produced so far are very promising. But these examples are still in the research and development stage. This is a disadvantage, as it means they cannot be yet properly communicated. And that is why the results from GeneBEcon are all the more useful. This study, my colleague mentioned before, reveals that many consumers still know very little about NGTs. This may be disadvantages, as it means they are still open to neutral information. A survey was conducted in Switzerland last year. You can see the results here. Consumers were asked for their views on NGTs. Beforehand, they were given information about the opportunities presented by NGTs. As you can see, the majority of consumers believe NGTs are useful once they learn about the opportunities they open up. A widespread lack of knowledge may make consumers more receptive to anti-GMO campaigns. It is often easier to frighten people and highlight the downsides. That is why I believe communicating the benefits of NGTs to be a huge challenge. Unfortunately, the media favors extreme position in reports that trigger negative emotions, such as fear and uncertainty. This can also present risks for retailers such as Migros. Consumers could reject NGTs or even boycott our business because of negative media coverage and anti-GMO campaigns. However, I believe it is vitally important that retailers in the EU also express support for NGTs. Unfortunately, It's unclear from previous analysis which sources of information consumers trust. Hopefully, a large-scale EU-backed project such as GeneBEcon will help to establish trust. Migros is firmly committed to NGTs, even though it's not always easy and requires courage. Last year, we organized a public event on NGTs with over 200 participants. The feedback was very positive. We also provided information on NGTs in our customer magazine, which reaches around 2 million people. We have received barely any negative feedback. We are also committed to the Sorten für Morgen Association, as I mentioned, and the other Swiss retailer is also represented here, which makes the situation easier than if it were on the opposite side. Even though very few customers have complained directly to Migros about its involvement, there is some opposition. Firstly, a popular initiative against NGTs has been launched in Switzerland. The Swiss people will almost certainly vote on this issue at some point. Secondly, the initiators of the popular initiative started a protest against Migros a few weeks ago. They have collected almost 60,000 signatures so far. They also published this video on Instagram I'd like to share with you. And I hope it works. Oh, sorry. No, it doesn't work. Can you hear something?
Which has always presented itself as sustainable and environmentally conscious, is now trying to bring genetic engineering to our plates behind us, and all this without strict controls and without writing on the packaging. We must not allow that to happen. The newspaper Tagesanzeiger was the first to uncover it. Now that Parliament has already decided to extend the moratorium, the Federal Council already wants to circumvent it, and with a special law from the pens of the lobby association Sorten für Morgen. And who sits on the board of the association? Yes, of course, Migros again. What does that mean now? Genetic engineering will come to our fields and plates, and this against the will of the Swiss population. It is a label fraud. The term genetic engineering is replaced by the harmless-sounding term new breeding process. Consumers have products that contain genetic engineering, but it is no longer written on them. And with that, they lose their freedom of choice and are led behind the light. It is a right-wing breach of trust. Migros, which had to stand up for the preservation of livelihoods and social responsibility, is now committed to the profit of the agrochemical companies. And this at the expense of future generations. That is why we are calling on Migros CEO Arminjan to withdraw from the Genetic Engineering Lobby Association Varieties for Tomorrow and recommit to true sustainability. And that includes agriculture that is based on diversity instead of genetic engineering. And where genetic engineering is in it, it should also be on it. We all have to put pressure on now. Sign the letter of protest from Migros and share the video.
Yes, that is very unpleasant, but our commitment remains unwavering. You can see the protest letter. In Switzerland, the Federal Council submitted its proposal on regulation of NGTs for consultation at the beginning of the month. On the upside, NGTs are to be governed under a new separate law, as it is in the EU. Unfortunately, the draft bill is very restrictive. It would be practically impossible to use NGTs under these conditions. However, there is at least the option for Switzerland adopting the EU's proposal. NGTs are certain to remain a major issue for some time to come. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabi, for showing us Migros' commitment on bringing NGT products to the Swiss market, and also to showing us about information about the Swiss situation and the opposition, but also the opposition you're facing, but also companies and your activities that push for the approval of NGT products to bring this to the consumer and also the benefits. Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to hand over to Emma. And Emma conducted a meta-analysis and literature review to give a summary of international trends and consumer research related to NGTs. So now we are leaving the European sphere, and I hand over to you, Emma, for your presentation.
Thank you, Amelie. As you mentioned, I'm Emma van den Awele, a recently graduated bioscience engineering student specializing in crop production and cellular genetics. And currently, I'm a trainee at Euroseeds. In this last part of the webinar, I will walk you through our systematic review and meta-analysis on consumer acceptance of bio-based products derived through NGTs. The aim was to place the consumer study, as explained by Jan before, within a broader context of existing consumer studies conducted in other countries. Gene editing tools like CRISPR offer real promise for sustainable food system, as we all know, but public skepticism is still a major barrier, like Gabi and Dennis also mentioned before. That's why understanding consumer attitude is so important. This study asks a key question. What consumer-related variables influence the acceptance of NGT-derived products? And to tackle this, we conducted a systematic review and meta-analysis, bringing together insights from dozens of empirical studies, with its goal to identify consistent predictors, highlight knowledge gaps, and offer clear evidence-based insights for better communication and policy strategies. We used the PICO framework, which provide us with a systematic way of doing literature research, come up with a research question and search strategy. From an initial of 476 articles, 24 high-quality relevant studies were selected for full meta-analysis. Only articles published between 2015 and 2025 were considered, with a focus on peer-reviewed journal articles that reported on empirical research only. And just to clarify, a systematic review helps us find and evaluate all relevant studies on a topic in a structured way, and a meta-analysis goes one step further as it applies statistical techniques to aggregate quantitative findings from all the selected studies. As you see on this slide, this world map shows where the research on consumer acceptance of NGTs is currently focused. As you can see, there's a clear concentration in high-income countries like the US, Germany, and the UK. Developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are largely missing from consumer acceptance studies, creating a clear geographical gap. Latin America is a notable case, as in many countries treat genome editing like conventional breeding, meaning gene editing products often aren't labeled. And because of this regulatory approach, public perception could be very different, either more accepting or simply unaware. But we don't have much consumer data from that region, unfortunately. So in short, the lack of studies from Latin America and other developing regions leaves a big gap in understanding how different regulatory and cultural contexts shape consumer acceptance. So this highlights actually the need for more globally inclusive research that reflects diverse cultural and regulatory contexts. In this analysis, we identified 8 key thematic categories that capture the different factors influencing consumer acceptance of NGTs. These range from more external factors like communication and knowledge to more internal factors such as personal values and attitudes. This figure at the top shows that the quantitative distribution of the identified independent variables across the 8 categories. The figure shows that external factors like communication strategies and consumer knowledge are most frequently studied, while internal factors such as personal values are less represented. And this actually shows us two things. First, the consumer decision making is a complex and influenced by different factors, as we can see. And secondly, there is a clear research gap, and future work could benefit from looking deeper into values and intrinsic motivation. To evaluate the influence of each independent variable on consumer attitudes, we assigned standardized impact scores using a custom labeling system as seen at the top. This qualitative system assessed how the categories affected acceptance of NGTs. To adjust for the differences in study size, we used a weighted average based on the sample size. This reduces the influence of smaller, less precise studies. Looking at the tables, perceived benefits and knowledge stood out as the most influential categories with the highest weighted scores. To deepen the analysis, as I said, I ran a meta-analysis. Impact scores were converted to standardized effects sizes using Cohen's d effect sizes, allowing consistent comparison across studies. Regression analysis, as seen here, linked the original scores to the standard measures. We conducted separate random effects meta-analysis for each category. For more details on the statistics and or programming, I refer you to the paper belonging to this research. And as you can see, all variables had positive statistically significant effects, but their strength varied. The results showed perceived benefits as the strongest driver, followed by knowledge and attitude towards science. Factors like communication and values had smaller effects, and demographics had almost none. Although there is some minor shifts in the overall ranking of the categories, the ranking approximately remains the same across the three analyses. So next, I'll guide you briefly through the key findings for each of the 8 categories. So first, knowledge showed a consistent, moderate effect across the studies, but with large variability. For each of the 8 categories, I created both a forest plot on the left and a funnel plot on the right. The forest plot shows the effect of each individual study and the overall results. Here we see high heterogeneity and a wide prediction interval. This tells us there's a lot of variation between studies. It suggests that while knowledge often boosts acceptance, its impact depends on how it's measured, whether it's objective or self-reported knowledge, and also the cultural or informational context. So interestingly, just providing more facts isn't always enough. It's how people feel about their knowledge and how information is communicated that often matters more. And on the right, the funnel plot checks for publication bias. In this case, the plot was fairly symmetrical, forming a classic inverted funnel shape. This suggests there is no major bias. In contrast, perceived benefits emerge as the strongest and most consistent predictor of consumer acceptance. When consumers clearly see personal or societal advantages like allergen-free food or environmental sustainability, they are much more willing to accept these NGT products. This shows that highlighting tangible, relatable outcomes is crucial for building acceptance, even more than simply providing information. So while knowledge lays the groundwork, it's ultimately the perceived benefits that convince consumers to accept NGT products. Third, the risk perception showed a weak but significant negative effect. Cross-cultural studies show that perceived risks are shaped by the national regulatory environment. In countries with low trust in institutions, stricter regulation can actually raise concerns by signaling that they might be dangerous. But in high trust environments, strong regulation tends to reassure consumers and reduce perceived risk. Overall, the findings suggest that while risk perception does influence consumer attitudes, its effect depends on both individual traits like risk aversion and also contextual factors like national regulation and public trust. Similarly, attitude towards science had a moderate effect also, but it appeared smaller in larger studies. Rather than being a direct driver, it likely acts as a moderator, shaping how people respond to other factors like trust, risk, and communication efforts. Together, these findings highlight that acceptance isn't just about the product or technology, but also trust in scientific institutions. So, using positive framing and aligning with public values can really help to boost acceptance. And one of the key takeaways of today is that clear and benefit-focused messaging is crucial for consumer acceptance. Visuals, trusted messengers, and transparent labeling all help boost trust and openness. We found that labels highlighting specific improvements like health or sustainability benefits were especially effective. However, the prediction interval shows a lot of variation in outcomes, which means it really depends how, by whom, and in what context the message is delivered. So it's not just about what we say, but how we frame it. Next, personal values also seem to have a moderate influence on consumer acceptance, but wide prediction intervals and high heterogeneity show that this is a complex context-dependent factor. The funnel plot showed clear asymmetry and uneven distribution, suggesting some publication bias and strong variability across studies. Studies with non-significant or negative results seem underrepresented, so we need to be cautious when interpreting how robust this effect really is. What stood out is that the ethical concerns like animal welfare or the desire for naturalness can significantly reduce acceptance. In fact, in some cases, providing more information may even backfire if it clashes with people's core beliefs. Then we also looked at how product-specific traits affect acceptance. So things like taste, safety, price, and labeling can matter, but only when they're relevant to the consumer. They are not always impactful on their own. So it's not the technology that matters most to consumers, it's the value the product brings, like better nutrition or animal welfare again. This supports earlier findings. Outcomes matter more than the method used to produce the foods. And then lastly, the sociodemographic factors. These factors have a weak direct influence but moderate other variables. Age, gender, and education shape responses to trust, communication, and benefits. In conclusion, acceptance is largely driven by perceived benefits and trust in science. Improving how we communicate, especially across different demographic groups, can significantly boost consumer acceptance for NGTs. This review also confirms that people are most likely to accept gene-edited products when they see clear benefits and trust the science behind them. While knowledge and risk perception do matter, they are less consistent and more context-driven. That's why transparent, benefit-oriented communication is so crucial and why trust in institution really makes a difference. These findings align well with the recent consumer survey that Jan explained before, reinforcing the idea that smart messaging and credible voices are key. Looking ahead, we need to better understand how cultural factors play a role, especially beyond Europe, and track how perceptions evolve over time. When we talk about policy and communication around NGTs, there are a few key points that really came forward from all the studies. First, emphasize tangible benefits because people respond when they see real world advantages like better health, more sustainable farming, and stronger food security. These benefits should always be front and center. Second, improve communication strategies because it's not just what we say, but how we say it. Use clear, honest language, be transparent, build trust, and make sure benefit-focused labels are easy to understand and meaningful. Third, build public trust in science and regulation, because trust is everything. People are more likely to accept gene editing when credible voices like scientists and regulators lead the conversation. And finally, we should tailor messages to your audience. Different groups care about different things, so adapt your message to what matters to them, whether that's ethics, safety, the environment, or health. This takes me to the end of a short summary of the research. I will now give the word back to Amelie for a brief Q&A on the discussed subjects.
Thank you very much, Emma, for showing us the results of your meta-analysis and also for the recommendations, so easy and clearly understandable what policymakers and industry can do, and also to give some weight on the different categories to better understand which ones may be the most relevant to focus on. And yes, with that, we are at the end of our presentations. And so you listened in now to these 3 presentations. And now we would like to ask questions to our audience again. And you will now see again the Slido appearing on the right-hand side of the screen. And something I should mention is, so you'll see the answers and word cloud only if you typed in an answer. So if you don't want to type in, no problem. So I can read it out again, but not that you're wondering why nothing is appearing. So our next questions to you would be, so which results caught your attention or even surprised you now when you heard these 3 presentations? Some answers coming in. Interesting, for example, to hear that the technology as such plays not a major role for the consumers, but rather the benefits they could have, or for example, price, sustainability. Then we see also value of good science still important. I think that's a very relevant topic and point for all the GeneBEcon results that can contribute to, as we heard from Gabi, a quite biased discussion also, with strong opinions. That acceptance by society seems quite okay. So the importance of examples and the campaign in Switzerland, it's really nice to see the association, so what Sorten für Morgen is doing, and but also, yes, the language that is used in the anti-NGT campaign. Okay, thank you very much for your answers to that. That's very interesting to hear. And our last question would be to you. So what would make you consider buying a product derived from NGTs? So there's, I think we'll need to go to the next question in the Slido first. And now there it is. So here you can choose, for example, so these are related a little bit to the categories our colleagues found out to be relevant. So clear environmental benefit, for example, lower pesticide use, better soil health, improved health or nutritional value. So direct benefit for the consumer, sustainability certification, for example, lower carbon footprint or water efficiency, low price, as was also mentioned, to compared to conventional products, higher trust in regulation and transparency, recommendation by trusted sources, for example, scientists or consumer organizations, alignment with personal values, or other. Well, let's see. We have 18 answers already. So with leading clear environmental benefits, for example, low pesticide use, better soil health, the NGTs can for sure be beneficial, improved health or nutritional value, what we also saw, and then less the sustainability certifications and low price, and at least one higher trust in regulation, transparency, and alignment with personal values. Change a little bit. Okay, but I think we have clear focus on the environmental benefits, so low pesticide use, better soil health, yeah, which can be shown, for example, through also the case studies GeneBEcon is working on, where we have really hands-on examples. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to still go into the Q&A. And so some of the questions were already answered, but I think maybe it's still interesting to have them answered in plenum. And so we had one question, which was, does lack of awareness of consumers reflect lack of information, as stated by the presenter, or could it reflect lack of interest or lack of exposure to information? So maybe Jan, you could say a few words to this. So I think you still have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Once again, I was reading the question, so I didn't. What was the question?
So the first one was, does the lack of awareness of consumers reflect the lack of information?
Oh, yeah. I answered privately this question. Yeah, definitely. There is both, yeah. There is a lack of information generally, according to our survey and other surveys. And on the other hand, consumers are busy, yeah, generally. And at the moment, if NGTs are known on the market, maybe they are not so much motivated to gain additional information. To collect information requires time and effort, and it's costly. So basically, at the moment, consumers are not too much motivated to look for the information. So both, there is a lack of information for consumers, and they are not so much motivated at the moment to collect information.
Jan, there's a question from my side. Do you have a recommendation, so to say, how to handle this?
That's what already mentioned. Yeah, there is a need to start when the legislation is approved at the EU level, or even before the approval of. There is a need for public institutions, scientists, and also all the key stakeholders to engage consumers more into discussions about NGTs and make sure that the information are unbiased, objective, and scientifically based. So there's more activity from public sector and stakeholders to be done at the moment.
So then there were also two more technical questions. So what was genetically edited in the yogurt, and why didn't you use the Nutri-Score actual levels, so from A to E?
We, based on the case study that is conducted within the GeneBEcon project, we combined it with the case study, the survey also, and there is potato starch in the yogurt that could be genetically that can be based on NGTs. Yeah, so potato starch.
So then we have a question. So a question for the panel: learning from the past and the journey associated with GMOs. Based on the GeneBEcon studies, what are the top 3 key aspects to address to overcome some of the challenges associated with acceptability of NGTs? So maybe, Dennis, you would like to answer this question first?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I just listed 3 points already. Well, 2 points and a personal reflection, I would say. I believe that it is quite important to present clear and beneficial applications, like we're doing in GeneBEcon, for example. We are developing a virus-resistant potato with an optimized starch quality. It has benefits for the farmer, for the industry, and ultimately for consumers also, if we can have a reduced amount of input of chemical inputs, pesticides in the agriculture. It's going to be a benefit for the farmer economically and for the consumer in the sense that we have less risk of pesticide exposure. So it's a clear beneficial application that I think will eventually help increase the acceptance. And I think this is seen from Emma's study also, that when there is a clear benefit, it tends to increase the acceptability. The other point, and I also mentioned it already in my introduction, that we should not exaggerate. We have seen some exaggeration from both sides, and let's say new genomic techniques, they are really valuable. They are really important. They are really useful in many ways. But if we look at a field such as plant breeding, it is still one tool out of many in the toolbox. So we're not going to have, I don't see in the short term or even in the long-term future that we're going to have an NGT-dominated plant breeding industry. But it's one tool in the toolbox. So it's not NGTs are not replacing conventional methods of breeding, but they are a very useful complement. And I think that this has to be stated also. The third point that I wanted to mention, and I'm sorry if I'm taking a long time now to answer, but it's that I think that consumer acceptance follows on being exposed to the products in part. Jan and his colleagues may correct me if I'm mistaken on this. You're the experts on this. But I believe that once consumers get exposed to products, they get familiar with them, and then that will, well, in many cases, I think that will lead to a higher acceptance also. It's more the unknown when we don't know, when we don't have any products on the market, then it is more easy to say that, well, I'm cautious about them.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So there are also maybe 2 questions for Gabi. The one is, glad that you support NGT, but why are you now already positioning yourself as a promoter, while you know that it will take years before it is allowed, and that in the coming years NGT developed products will be very limited, while you will certainly receive a lot of opposition for society?
Yes, that's true, but I think doing nothing and saying nothing is not an option, because it's an important topic, and we as Migros, we have to make sure that we can use wheat and potatoes and every other things also in the future. So we have to make sure that our farmer can produce with lesser pesticides and so on. And I think we have to communicate about this topic. We are responsible for this, and if we say nothing, then it could be like at the campaigns with the GMO. So we only one side is heard, and we'd like to build a second side to be heard, even though it's not funny every time. But so it's like.
As you showed, yes. And then, so we also have a question on this Swiss regulatory proposal. So it seems that the dignity of plants is mentioned as a criterion in there. And the question is, how can this be measured or reliably be implemented?
Yes, that's a good question. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know why our Federal Council is take this up in its proposal. I have no answer on this question because I don't understand it also.
Yeah, but an interesting point that this is in there. Then we have a question on Emma's literature review. If this is available as a GeneBEcon result already.
No, it's not. It's still ready to be reviewed by different partners, and then the results can be shown.
Yeah, but as you said, so you're happy to give also detailed information about the statistics. I think you did not dive into details in your presentation, but you could give all this information, and we are happy to make the link to all of this raw data, so to say. So then what we also have for the panel, how do you believe the Commission's proposal on NGTs will influence public perception and consumer trust in these technologies? So maybe, Jan, this is a question for you.
Yeah, it is the step in the right direction, but even in the past, there was a stalemate with respect to approval prior to the Commission's proposal, which was not yet accepted, but there was a stalemate with respect to the approval, which was the stalemate was in the Council of Ministers and the Parliament rather than with the European Commission. And yeah, it's a step in the right direction. There is it brings a more scientifically based approach to regulation, and how this will be related to consumer trust. Yeah, there is both interrelationship between what consumers think and what is the legislation. So if one aspect changes in the right direction, it has also a positive impact on the consumer trust and perception of NGTs.
Then we have another question. So maybe that's also one for Gabi on the retailer's perspective. So considering the growing emphasis on transparency and traceability in the food chain, how can we design effective communication strategies that clearly distinguish NGT-derived products from the traditional GMOs while maintaining consumer trust?
Well, we are working on this. I can't answer this in one or two sentences. It's hard work to make such a strategy, and yeah, I think one of the topics is to have good examples and to communicate constantly, and not only once, but once again. And so, because it's really hard and difficult topics to understand, and have to try to make it clear and understandable. And I think it costs us years for communicating about these topics.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And there's also still some time probably until products reaching the European market. So officially, so maybe there's also time to communicate about this. So I think we'll have one last question, and there's one to Dennis about the NGT products developed in the GeneBEcon project. So the question is it allowed to bring this edited potato to the market, or only allowed for research purposes?
I would say it's not forbidden, but it needs an authorization under the GMO legislation. So it is we cannot put it out for commercial field release as it is right now, but it needs under the current legislation, and until we have a new legislation on NGTs, which has been proposed by the European Commission. But until then, it is regulated as a GMO. And because of that, we need, to have it for commercial field release, we need to have a risk assessment by EFSA and risk authorization by the European Commission. So, and we know from experience, from many years of experience now, that it's to get a crop authorized for commercial field release this way is extremely difficult, if not even impossible. So that's the current status, and but that's for commercial field release. We can have it for research purpose. We have field trials in Sweden, for example, for research purpose.
And so that's the current situation, and taking into account the prospect, so the potential new regulations, so how, based on the changes made, I think this one would be NGT1 category. So the one developed, am I right?
Yep, that's correct. Most certainly, the products we are developing in GeneBEcon, they will meet this proposed NGT category 1 status. And so let's say in a couple of years, we may have a new NGT regulation in place. Then the prospects for getting these products that we are developing in GeneBEcon, the prospect of getting them out on the market and actually, so we are able to start benefiting from their reaping their benefits. It's much higher than it is today.
Okay, thank you very much. So having a look at the time, I will close the Q&A session now, and thank you all very, very much for contributing to this first webinar. So I will also give a prospect to the next webinars. So the next one on the virus-resistant starch potato, which we were ending on now, which will be on 13th of May. And I thank you all very much for participating to today's webinar, and invite you to register for the other very interesting webinars as well. And I hope you found this webinar valuable and interesting, and the results of the studies you can find on the GeneBEcon website, and follow us on social media. And thank you very much for being with us today. Bye.
Thank you.